The ink was barely dry on the prenup when Ayo looked at Remy and whispered, "You think I'm nothing without you?" He didn't flinch. He just leaned back and smirked. "It's just business. You get what you bring. That's fair." She looked at the paper. $0 if they divorced. No access to joint assets, no safety net. Still, she signed it. Not because she agreed, but because she knew. One day, the balance would shift, and when it did, he wouldn't be ready. Ayo walked slowly down the aisle, trying to smile, but inside, her heart was heavy. She wore a simple, borrowed dress. It wasn't fancy, but it was all she could afford. She had no money, no big name, no rich family behind her. All she had was love, pure and honest. The night before the wedding, Remy, her soon-to-be husband, handed her a prenup. It said that if they ever divorced, she would get nothing, not a single coin. He looked at her and said, "It's just business." His words stung, but Ayo still signed it. Not because she agreed with it, but because she believed in love. She believed in him. At the wedding, she smiled for the cameras, but the whispers in the crowd were louder than the music. People weren't talking about how beautiful the ceremony was. They were gossiping about how she came with nothing, how she didn't deserve someone like Remy. But Ayo stayed calm. She looked at Remy, thinking love would be enough. What she didn't know was that this marriage would test everything, and that the tables would turn in ways no one ever expected. After the wedding, everything started to change for Ayo. At first, she thought married life would bring them closer, but Remy slowly began to treat her like she didn't matter. He stopped calling her his wife in public. Whenever they attended events or business gatherings, he would introduce her with a fake smile and say, "This is Ayo. She handles logistics." That was it. No mention of her being his partner or his support system. Just someone who helped with small tasks. In meetings, he acted like she didn't exist. If she gave an opinion, he would sigh, roll his eyes, and say things like, "You should just be grateful you're even in the room." His words were cold, sharp, and meant to remind her that she wasn't important. People around him followed his lead. They looked at Ayo like she was just another staff member, not the woman who stood beside him on their wedding day. But Ayo didn't fight back with anger. She didn't argue or complain. She kept quiet and observed. While he ignored her ideas, she paid attention to every detail of his business world, how deals worked, who mattered, what failed, what succeeded. And late at night, when the house was quiet and Remy was asleep, Ayo sat at the dining table with her old laptop. She didn't write in a diary like most people do when they're sad. She didn't write about her feelings. Instead, she wrote plans, business plans, real ideas. She started building something in secret. She watched online videos, read articles, and started teaching herself about investment, tech, and business development. Every time Remy pushed her away or made her feel small, she used that pain as fuel to dream bigger. He thought she was just sitting quietly in the background, being a good little wife with nothing to say. But in reality, Ayo was creating something powerful. She wasn't wasting her silence. She was turning it into strength. She knew she didn't have money or support, but she had her mind, and no prenup could take that away from her. While Remy showed off to the world, Ayo worked in the shadows, preparing for a future that would one day shock him, because she wasn't just his wife. She was becoming her own empire, quietly, carefully, stronger every single day. One rainy morning, Ayo was sitting by the window with a cup of tea, thinking about all the things going wrong in her life. The sky was dark, and the rain kept falling, just like her thoughts, heavy and silent. Suddenly, her phone rang. The number was unknown. She almost ignored it, thinking it was another spam call or sales pitch. But something told her to pick it up. A man on the other end introduced himself as a lawyer. He asked, "Are you Ayo Adewale?" She said yes, a little confused. Then he said something strange. A distant relative named Mr. Amadi had passed away. Ayo paused. That name sounded faintly familiar, but she didn't know him well. He had been one of those quiet family members no one talked much about. A man who kept to himself, didn't attend weddings or family events, and lived far away. She was still trying to remember who he was when the lawyer dropped a bombshell. "You are the sole heir to Mr. Amadi's estate. He left behind an offshore trust valued at $40 million. Ayo froze. She didn't speak. She couldn't. For a moment, she thought maybe this was a mistake. Maybe it was still a scam. She asked for proof, and the lawyer calmly explained everything. Paperwork, Signatures, legal details. It was real. Her hands began to shake. Her chest felt tight, not from fear, but from shock. $40 million. Her whole life had been a struggle. She had signed a prenup that left her with nothing. She was used to people ignoring her, talking down to her, treating her like she didn't belong. And now, out of nowhere, she had become a millionaire. Just like that. But even with all that emotion running through her, Io stayed calm. Her voice didn't tremble. She took a deep breath and said, "Thank you for informing me. I'd like to keep this confidential, for now." She didn't scream. She didn't rush to tell Remy. She knew better. This was her moment, and she wasn't going to waste it. She wanted time to think, time to plan, because for the first time in her life, the power was in her hands. Quietly, without anyone knowing, she had gone from being the woman with nothing to the woman who could now build anything. It was the moment everything changed. Not just her bank account, but her name, her worth, and her future. And no one saw it coming. After finding out about the inheritance, Io didn't act any different. She didn't tell Remy. She didn't scream or celebrate. She didn't change her clothes or her routine. She still woke up early, made breakfast, smiled when Remy walked in, and kissed him goodbye like nothing had happened. She still listened to him talk about his work, even when he didn't ask about hers. She still cooked dinner, cleaned the house, and played the quiet, supportive wife. Remy had no idea what had changed. He still thought he was in control. He believed Io had no power, no money, no choices. He thought she was lucky just to be with him, and Io let him believe it. She didn't argue. She didn't try to prove anything. She kept her secret locked deep inside her heart, because sometimes the best way to win is not to show your strength too soon. But behind her soft smile, Io was moving differently. She started making quiet calls. She reached out to lawyers, financial experts, and property agents. She didn't use her real name. Instead, she created a company name that no one could trace back to her. Under that name, she bought small properties. Nothing flashy, just smart investments. A little house here, a small building there. She learned how to manage them herself. She also saw something missing in the tech world, something she could fix. So she funded a startup. Again, no one knew it was her. She stayed in the background, watching everything, learning, growing. While Remy still called her just the wife, she was slowly building her own business empire, not for revenge, not to show off, but to create her own space, her own table. Every time Remy looked at her and said, "You should just be thankful," she smiled, because inside, she knew the truth. She was no longer the woman with nothing. She was the woman who could walk away at any time and stand on her own. But she didn't walk away yet. Not because she was weak, but because she was wise. She was waiting for the right moment. Io was playing a quiet game, one that required patience, planning, and strength. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She was building something real, slowly, quietly, and powerfully. And when the time came, the world would finally see what she had been preparing all along. Not with noise, but with results. Because Io knew, true power doesn't rush. It rises in silence. Things started to go wrong for Remy. His business, which once looked big and successful, began to fall apart. A major deal he was counting on, a merger with another company, completely collapsed. Investors pulled out. Partners walked away. Money stopped flowing the way it used to. Remy was stressed, angry, and confused. But instead of taking responsibility, he started blaming everyone around him. At work, he pointed fingers at his team. At home, his frustration spilled over. He became short-tempered, more distant, and more careless with his words. He acted like Io was part of the problem, like she had failed him somehow. He forgot that she had always stood by his side, even when he didn't treat her well. One evening, they sat down for dinner. The food was quiet between them, and the air felt heavy. Remy didn't say much at first. Then, out of nowhere, he dropped a cold sentence across the table. "If you'd been smarter with money," he said without even looking up, "maybe we wouldn't be drowning now." Io froze for a moment, her spoon halfway to her mouth. She looked at him, not with anger, but with silence. Her face didn't change, but her mind was screaming. How could he say that? The man who made her sign a prenup, the man who treated her like she had no value, the man who thought he was the only smart one in the room, had no idea that the woman sitting across from him was now worth $40 million. He had no clue that she had already bought several properties, that she had investments growing quietly, that she had helped launch a tech company that was already turning profits. He had no idea she wasn't just the wife anymore. She was a silent powerhouse. She didn't reply to his insult. She simply took another bite of her food and let him continue thinking she was small. But inside, she felt something shift. Not pain, not sadness. Power. She realized how invisible her strength was to him, and how blind he had become to everything that mattered. He kept talking, still blaming others, still lost in his own ego. But Ayo didn't hear it anymore. All she could think was, "You have no idea who you're talking to. You have no idea you're sleeping beside a millionaire." And the best part, she didn't need to tell him. One day, life would show him, in a way he would never forget. The evening was bright, full of laughter, music, and flashing lights. It was a big tech gala, and the hall was filled with successful business people, investors, and founders. Remy walked in proudly, shaking hands and pretending everything was fine, even though his company was struggling behind the scenes. Ayo walked in beside him, dressed simply, as always. No one really noticed her, just like usual. But tonight, something was different. The host stepped up to the microphone and made a special announcement. A mysterious donor had just given $2 million to support women in technology. The crowd was buzzing. People whispered and turned their heads, trying to guess who the powerful donor might be. Then the host smiled and said, "Please welcome the woman behind this gift, Ayo Adewale." The room went completely silent for a second. All eyes turned. Remy's smile dropped. He looked at Ayo like he was seeing her for the first time. She calmly stepped forward, walked to the stage, and took the mic with steady hands. Her face was soft, but her eyes were strong. She wasn't nervous. She didn't need to be. She looked around the room and said with calm confidence, "To all the women who were told they brought nothing to the table, build your own table." And just like that, the room exploded with applause. People stood. Some even had tears in their eyes. Cameras clicked. Phones recorded. Everyone was cheering for her, not because she was rich, but because she was real, powerful, and finally seen. Remy sat in his chair, frozen. He didn't clap. He didn't blink. He just sat there, shocked. He had spent years treating Ayo like she was nothing, calling her an assistant, laughing at her opinions, ignoring her worth. And now, the same woman he had once silenced was being celebrated by the world. Ayo didn't look at him directly. She didn't need to. Her message had already reached him, louder than any argument could. The mask had slipped. The truth was out. She was no longer in the shadows. She was standing in her own light, and it was bright. That night changed everything. People saw her differently, and more importantly, Remy did too. But by then, it was too late. The woman he never valued had become the woman everyone admired, and he couldn't stop it, because she hadn't taken revenge. She had simply risen, quietly, completely, and beautifully. When they got back home from the gala, the silence was loud. Remy slammed the door behind them. His face was full of anger, but deep down, it was fear. Everything he thought he knew had changed in one night. The quiet woman he had overlooked, spoken down to, and brushed aside had just been revealed as a powerful millionaire in front of the whole city. He turned to Ayo, his voice shaking. "How long have you been lying to me?" he shouted. "How long have you been pretending?" Ayo didn't shout back. She stood calmly, her hands by her side, and looked at him with steady eyes. Her voice was soft but strong. "I wasn't hiding," she said. "You just weren't looking." Remy blinked. He didn't know what to say. For years he had been so sure she was weak, so sure she needed him, so sure she couldn't survive without his name and his money. And now he realized she had passed him long ago, not just in wealth, but in wisdom, strength, and grace. "I was trying to protect you," he said, trying to explain. "I just didn't want to risk everything." Ayo raised an eyebrow, not angry, just tired. "You mean you didn't want to share?" she replied gently. He moved closer to her, now almost begging. "Let's just forget the prenup. We don't need it anymore. We can start over." Ayo looked at him, not with hate, but with something even stronger. Clarity. She remembered the night before their wedding, how he had made her sign that paper without even asking how she felt. She remembered how he told her it was just business, how he made her feel like she brought nothing to the table. She took a deep breath and answered him with the same quiet strength she had always carried. "The prenup," she said, "was your idea." Remy's face dropped. The weight of his own choices hit him like a wave. He couldn't take it back. He couldn't undo the years he treated her like she didn't matter. And now, when she finally stood in her power, he wanted to rewrite the past. But Ayo didn't want revenge. She just wanted peace. She had already moved on. Not physically, but emotionally, mentally, and financially. Remy was still living in the old story, but Ayo had already written a new one. And in that story, she wasn't someone's wife. She was a woman who found her worth, stood on her own, and never needed saving. A few weeks after the confrontation, Ayo quietly went to the courthouse and filed for divorce. No shouting, no warnings, no drama, just calm, steady steps. She didn't ask Remy for anything, not the house, not the car, not the company shares. She didn't even ask for the thing she had once helped him build. She simply signed the papers and walked away. Remy was shocked. He had expected a fight. He thought she'd argue or try to take something, maybe even use her new wealth to destroy him. But Ayo didn't do any of that. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want to prove anything. She had already won in a way that was bigger than money or pride. She had found herself, and that was enough. When the news broke, the story spread like wildfire. The media picked it up and ran with headlines like, "Millionaire wife walks away without a penny," and "The silent storm who left without a word." People were stunned. Social media buzzed with her story. Everyone wanted to know more about the woman who had stayed quiet for so long, only to leave with grace and strength. But Ayo didn't care about the noise. She didn't give interviews. She didn't go online to explain herself. She didn't need the world's approval. She was finally free from a marriage that had once made her feel small, from a man who never saw her worth, and from a life where she had to hide her own light. She packed her things simply and walked out of the house with just a small suitcase. No tears, no regrets, just peace. She left behind everything that didn't serve her anymore, including the version of herself that once believed she had to settle for less. Remy, on the other hand, was left in silence. The man who once had control over everything now sat alone in a big, empty house. He tried to reach out. He sent messages. He even asked friends to talk to her, but Ayo didn't respond. Not out of anger, but because she had closed that chapter forever. She didn't need to say a single bad word about him. Her silence spoke louder than anything else, and the world listened. They called her the silent storm, quiet, powerful, and unforgettable. But Ayo didn't care about the name they gave her. She had only one word for herself now: free, and that was all she ever wanted. After leaving the marriage, Ayo didn't waste time showing off her money or trying to prove anything to anyone. She stayed quiet, just like she always had, but her actions spoke louder than any words ever could. With the money she inherited, she started building, not just for herself, but for others too. She remembered how it felt to be ignored, to be seen as someone who brought nothing to the table, so she decided to change that for other women. She set up scholarships for young girls who wanted to study tech, business, or engineering, but didn't have the money. She picked those who reminded her of herself, quiet, hard-working, and overlooked. She didn't put her name on the scholarships. The girls never even knew who was behind their second chance, but they felt it, and they used it well. Next, Ayo started investing in small businesses owned by women. She listened to their ideas, gave them funding, and helped them grow. Some of these women had been rejected by banks, ignored by investors, or laughed at in meetings, but Ayo believed in them, just like she had once wished someone believed in her. She also opened a tech incubator, a place where women could come, learn, build, and connect. It was a space filled with creativity, dreams, and second chances. She didn't name the building after herself. She didn't even attend the opening ceremony. She wanted the focus to stay on the work, not on her face. People started noticing her work. They began asking, "Why don't you talk about all the things you're doing? Why don't you share your story more?" Ayo would simply smile and say, "Because silence is a language too, one only the wise can hear." She didn't need headlines or cameras to feel powerful. She didn't need applause to feel proud. Her reward was seeing lives change, seeing women rise, and knowing she helped build something real. She was creating an empire, not of noise and fame, but of impact and purpose. Every step she took was quiet, but every result was loud. She had become a name in the business world, but not because she chased fame. People respected her, not just for her success, but for how she carried it, with grace, with wisdom, and with silence. Ayo never looked back. She didn't waste time trying to prove her worth to people who once ignored her. She let her work speak, and it did. In every life she touched, in every woman she lifted, and in every dream she made possible without ever needing to shout. Now, whenever Remy is at parties or business events, he tells people, "I used to be married to her," hoping it will impress someone. He drops Ayo's name like it still connects him to her success. But people don't react the way he hopes. They nod politely and move on. Because the truth is, no one cares. Ayo has become a name on her own, a powerful one. She's on magazine covers, giving interviews about leadership, empowerment, and business. She stands on stages around the world, sharing her story, not of revenge, but of quiet strength and growth. Her face is everywhere, not because she chased attention, but because the world finally saw what she had to offer. She's respected, admired, and celebrated. And Remy, he's just the man she once knew. His name doesn't follow hers anymore. It fades behind her shadow. He remembers the prenup he once proudly gave her, the paper that said she would get nothing if she left. At the time, he thought it protected him. He believed it would keep her small. But now, that paper means nothing, because the only thing she signed away was a future tied to a man who never saw her value. Ayo never needed his money. She never needed his name. And in the end, she didn't lose anything. She gained everything: her freedom, her peace, her voice, and a legacy bigger than anyone could have imagined. The empire she built, the women she helped, the lives she changed, all of it came from the strength he never saw in her. He didn't just lose a wife. He lost a future that could have been brighter with her by his side. He lost a partner, a visionary, and a legacy that now belongs to her alone. And the one paper that truly changed everything wasn't the prenup. It was the inheritance letter, the business plans, the silent decisions, the documents she signed for her companies, her foundation, her empire. She left with nothing, and yet she walked away, owning everything. And now, while Remy tries to hold on to her memory, the world knows the truth. She was never his to begin with. She was always becoming something greater. He just didn't look closely enough until it was too late. If you've ever been underestimated, if someone ever told you, you bring nothing to the table, build your own table, silently, boldly, powerfully, because sometimes the loudest success is the one they never saw coming. Share this if you believe quiet women make the loudest legends. Tag someone who needs to hear this today. Follow for more true power stories that speak in silence.